Hey guys, it's Will with Just Add Water. We're back today and I want to go over 5 things we're going to look for with a backyard water feature or backyard pond specifically to make sure that you're getting that complete ecosystem approach. So as I mentioned, there are 5 things that we do. That's your rocks and gravel is 1, plants 2, fish 3, your filtration both mechanically and biologically is number 4, and then your recirculation system, making sure you're getting enough of it, is number 5. So when we have all 5 of these things working together in a balanced fashion, your pond should be flourishing and your maintenance should be a lot easier on you. Rocks and gravel, step 1 of our 5 things that we're going to talk about today. The biggest reason why we have rocks and gravel in our pond is to promote beneficial bacteria growth. So we have the correct amount of layer is very important. You can definitely still go too deep, and then it's, just like if you were to have an earth bottom pond with heavy amounts of organics and sludge and mud and everything like that. So that's the first thing I want to make sure that we fully understand, is that when I'm talking about rocks and gravel, I'm talking about having the correct amount of rocks and gravel in your pond, right? So that's just enough to cover liner. So maybe 2 inches, maybe 3, somewhere in there like that. Now, if we're talking about 5-6+ inches of gravel in there and not doing maintenance, not having your spring clean out or anything like that done, not adding those beneficial bacteria, the heterotrophic bacteria, all that stuff, now we're talking about maintenance problems. And that's the complete opposite of this whole video. We're talking about how to maintain and keep up on it, and these 5 things that we're looking for. So, done with that little rant, I guess. So rocks and gravel, beneficial bacteria and enzymes. What the gravel does is it causes a space for all of these bacteria to colonize on. That piece of gravel, it's 2 inches, whatever it may be, the bacteria goes all the way around, things like that. So, similar to if we add balls to our ball. That 1-inch ball is 19 square inches of surface area. So now you've lined the bottom of it, you can add, you can supplement the bacteria growth that your pond is creating for itself. We do it with our autodose systems, with manually adding beneficial bacteria, the dry scoop and the cold water beneficial bacteria, anything like that. All of this stuff, all of these treatments, that's where it's going, that's where it's growing. You're not just throwing it in the water and hoping it lasts. It's all about that, giving that place for it to live. Okay, step 2 and 3 are going to kind of go hand in hand. That's our plants and fish. So the reason why they go hand in hand is because they have a very symbiotic relationship together. So, our fish feed off of the plants, whether it be the algae, the insects the plants attract, things like that. But then also the plants use the fish waste as fertilizer and things like that. So we have these things that work very, very well together, and that's why they're such big factors. They're not just to make everything look pretty. I mean, that is definitely one of the perks, is that, heavily planted up shoreline, getting your butterflies, your dragonflies, all that kind of stuff with whatever type of plants you want, and then also having those fish. Everybody loves to stare into a campfire and just watch it dance all over. You get the exact same euphoria with watching your fish. So I kind of just hit on it pretty quick, but your fish, when everything is, again, in correct balance, meaning you don't have too large of a fish load, or you are maintaining your plants, that's when that symbiotic relationship between these two is occurring, and we're getting that balanced approach. Again, that's all we're looking for here, is these 5 things helping balance each other out. Plants are a great way to not only naturalize it, that's why they call it an aquatic garden, is because you can do all kinds of things with it. It's not just rocks. So, the pond behind me currently has some strawberries. They grow in the stream in the spring. They use impatiens to get their color. We have annuals, we have perennials, we have tropicals. All of those things can be incorporated into your water garden. So if you've seen our time-lapse videos of our construction or anything like that, you've probably noticed that we dig our ponds at different shelves. So this is a great time to talk about that. We're talking about how plants and fish work together as part of balancing the system out, but then also what can get overlooked is the reason why we add those shelves in our excavation is actually for our plants and fish. So we have that top shelf, that upper shelf, that's where we're going to be planting our marginal plants. Anywhere from 4 to 8 inches of water with varied gravel height in there to give that place a good spot for that plant to grow. And then we have that second shelf, which is normally around 18 to 24 inches in depth. That's a great depth for that crown jewel, that water lily, to grow and flourish there. They do really well at that 18 to 24 inch depth there. You get a lot of great blooms, great pads, everything. You don't have to deal with those super long stems of it being deeper, and you don't have to deal with anything burning up in it super shallow. And then that bottom part, that lower depth, the third shelf, that's actually for your fish to overwinter. Here in Iowa, it gets pretty cold. We normally experience on average 6 to 10 inches of ice. Koi need a minimum of 18 to overwinter and survive. So again, depending on your fish load, size of fish, things like that, they should all be able to fit down in there, whether it be in a cave or just in the bottom of your pond. So that's why we do that, is so all of those fish and plants can continue to thrive in your pond. So going back to that top shelf for our aquatic plants and those marginals, I kind of mentioned 4 to 8 inches of water depth in there. Just like your landscape plants, some plants like different depths, things like that. So you have that ability to vary in there. We actually bare root all of our plants in the gravel. So I'll knock off all the soil and just put it right in there and just kind of prop it up with some bigger cobbles or some gravel to get it established. The reasoning behind that, and especially with our lilies, is it allows that root mass to really go crazy and absorb, right? That's the whole point, and why plants are so important, is it's absorbing all that excessive amounts of nutrients that would then in turn make your algae flourish. So it's really hard to have a well established planted pond have really bad algae problems, because they have to fight over the same food source, right? So once your water temperatures get up in your pond and you can actually, everything starts getting balanced and things are able to grow for the majority of your season, now we're talking about those plants out competing those algae blooms. And that's also why it's important to be adding those cold water beneficial bacterias beforehand, like before your water temperatures get that warm, because then they are also able to help combat against the algae when it's colder out. So kind of tie in step 1 into step 2 with that gravel and the beneficial bacterias helping with the plants helping with the algae. So with fish, I've mentioned a couple of times about having the proper fish load. There's kind of 2 ways to figure that out. You have your total gallons, 1 inch of fish for every 10 gallons in your water feature. So, you have to do a little bit of math. If you're not quite sure how to do your total gallons in your feature, it's length times width times average depth. That gets you a cube, and then you multiply it by a percentage of what you think that cube takes up, right? Your pond's probably not a perfect cube. So for this one, for example, I'm going to do about 12 times 19 times 18. That's my cube. That's my length times width times average depth. And then it's probably about 80%, 75% of that cube. Multiply it by that percentage, and then multiply it by 7.48. So there are 7.48 gallons per cubic foot. And then you should have your number. So that should come up around roughly 2,000 gallons. You're going to give or take a couple hundred gallons one way or the other probably. So again, that formula is length times width times average depth times probably about 0.75. And then you multiply that by 7.48 for how many gallons are in a cubic foot, and that should tell you your total gallons in a pond. So then to figure out your fish load, you're going to divide that number by 10 gallons. That's how many inches of fish you have or can have. So if you have, you know, 12 1-inch fish and one 30-inch fish, now we have 42 inches of fish. So depending on how you do that, that's a great rule of thumb for your fish load. There's another formula to figure out your fish. They should normally be pretty close to each other. It is 1 inch of fish for every square foot of surface area you have. So if you don't want to do the first one where you're measuring in a three-dimensional way, you can figure out the approximate square footage of your surface area or the top of your pond, length times width. And again, you'll still have to multiply that because it won't be a perfect rectangle. And then you should be able to get about 1 inch of fish for every 1 square foot of surface area. So assuming you have the correct fish load, a good plant load, rocks and gravel, all of that going, now we're going to move right into factor number 4, and that is your filtration system. So with filtration, I'm talking about both mechanical, which would be our skimmer, and biological, which is our biofall. You know, it's very similar to a swimming pool. Everyone's been at least seen one. Swimming pools have skimmers to collect that surface debris. You know, most ponds are outside, it's going to be windy, you're going to have leaves blowing, anything like that. You want to collect all of that debris at the surface level going into your skimmer basket or net before it has the ability to get soaked down into and just sit and decompose in your pond. So that's the big thing about mechanical filtration, is removing that surface debris so you don't have to fight yourself against that heavy organic load dying in the bottom of your pond. The skimmer also underneath the basket has a filter pad to help, you know, protect your pump, and that's actually where we're going to go with step 5. But biological filtration, you know, using the swimming pool example is, again, you still have some sort of external source. So our biofall, let's call it an external source. It's just attached to the top of our waterfall. It's external of the pond. It's added beneficial bacteria growth in that biofall. So, you know, we're not talking about a sand filter, a bead filter, anything like that. That biofall, same thing. The way that's designed, it's almost cone-shaped, where we're pushing that high volume of water in through the bottom. It's swirling, and then as it gets bigger, that water slows down. And as it's slowing down, it's percolating up through those 2 filter pads. And then if you do have extra biological growth material like bioballs, it's all going through that. So that's what that's all designed for. Another biological filter that we often talk about in our YouTube channel is our wetland filters. Same concept with that as your biofall, just on a larger scale. Blasting water in through the bottom, giving it a spot to go up, slow down, and then percolate through that biological growth material. It's all about surface area, guys. You know, that same thing why we talked about why there's gravel in the bottom of the pond. That's why there's filter pads in there. That's why those bio balls. I mentioned, you know, that 1-inch plastic ball has 19 inches of square inches of surface area for the beneficial bacteria and enzymes to grow on. That's exactly what we're doing here. And then, so obviously, you know, there's some math that goes with all of this. So we're gonna, when we build, we're speccing out the proper size filtration system for the flow rate you want as the customer. More importantly, for the pond size. You know, you can always go bigger. The worst thing I can do is give you something that's too small and then make your maintenance life harder. So your skimmers have a flow rate, they have a square footage that they can effectively, you know, skim. Same with your biofalls. They have a flow rate where it's not uncommon for us to see, you know, new customers that have a biofall that's the correct size for the pond, but, you know, maybe the homeowner wanted more sound or something going through their waterfall, so they just put a huge pump on there. Well, your biofall is not going to work effectively if your pushing too much water through it, right? That we were talking about how it percolates up through. There's a speed that it needs to be going through there. And that's all based on the size of that box. So if you want to have a bigger, more flowy stream, you know, we need to talk about putting a 6,000 on there instead of a 2,500 or something along those lines. But that's all stuff that we look into, whether it be an inspection on a new customer, you know, how we build ponds and things like that. We're going to get into the nerd behind it and do all those numbers for you. So with that, and your biofilm having all those numbers and the flow rates and everything, that flow rate is actually number 5. Specifically, we're going to talk about recirculation. So all of this is a self-contained recirculating system. You know, we've replicated nature with our plants and fish and rocks and gravel and everything. We are lowering our maintenance with our filtration system and making sure we're keeping this crystal clear water and all of that. Now, one of the things that we have to talk about is moving that water, right? So going back to nature in that lake, natural body of water, whatever, is getting that fresh free supply of water, whether it be a creek running through or something like that. So if I just dig a hole, put a liner in it, and fill it up with water, it's going to be stagnant, and I'm just going to have mosquitoes, right? So with this, we're moving all of that water. We're turning that water over at least bare minimum once an hour. So this pond, that's, you know, again, it's 2,000 gallons. We actually have 2 pumps on here. We're moving this pond over about 5 times an hour. I got an SLD 4 to 7 and an Aquascape 4000 in there. So at least 5 times an hour. So that's really important for multiple reasons. A, I don't want to deal with stagnant water. It smells, it's gross, all of that. One of the biggest pond myths you can have is that they attract mosquitoes. It's just not true, right? I just said I'm moving this entire body of water over 5 plus times an hour, minimum of 1. So we're moving thousands of gallons of water an hour, but also, like, we have plants. Plants are going to get your dragonflies. Dragonflies eat that, eat your mosquito larvae. You know, that whole system, nobody would ever, you wouldn't be watching this. You wouldn't be interested in it if you thought there was actually a mosquito problem. So yeah, we're moving all of that water, but most importantly is that moving water, as it's crashing over those rocks, it's oxygenating all those rocks. All those bubbles there, that's oxygen. That's really good for the whole ecosystem, not just your fish. You know, your beneficial bacteria have to have that oxygen. That oxygen's got to get down to the bottom. Your biofilm needs that oxygen. So that's why that's important, and recirculating that water is important. That's why we love our waterfalls. Not only are they awesome, beautiful, wonderful to enjoy, listen to, all of that, but it actually has a very important role in that pond itself. That's the reason why when we shut a pond down for the winter, we add that Pro 20 or Pro 60 aerator, is to supplement that oxygen loss that we no longer have. So it's actually really hard for a correctly built ecosystem pond with your streaming waterfalls to ever have a, you know, high ammonia level or a lack of oxygen when it's been running. So that's awesome. It's really good for your fish health, and it's really good for making it so if you do get too much gravel, you know, going back to step 1, tying these all in, it's much harder for that to become anaerobic, because there's such a high amount of oxygen in your body of water. Now when it's colder water temperatures, that actually holds more dissolved oxygen, but when it gets really hot in the summer, things like that, that's again why those waterfalls are so awesome, is because you're putting so much dissolved oxygen in the water. So quick recap, our 5 steps are rocks and gravel, plants, fish, filtration, biological and mechanical, and then recirculation. So we kind of tied it all in, went back and forth, kind of all over the place, how they all work together. And the whole point of this is to make it so that maintenance life or that pond is healthy and balanced. So as long as you have everything spec'd out properly, you have correct amounts of everything, you should have a very well-balanced system, and it should, as that system matures and grows, it should get easier and easier and easier to take care of.